And we begin with breaking news. A suspected drunk driver won't face charges for a crash that killed a 78-year-old woman last January because of errors made during the investigation. CBS 58 investigative reporter Kristen Barbarisi is here to explain. Kristen?
Mike, the case was dismissed even though court documents show the suspect blew a .248, more than 3 times the legal limit. On January 30th, the suspect slammed into 78-year-old Kathleen Deichel. Deichel was stopped at a stop sign at 92nd and Lapham in West Allis and died a day later from her injuries. According to court documents, before conducting field sobriety tests or a breathalyzer, police took the suspect to her home and allowed her to go inside. Then police did the field tests, arrested the suspect, and took her to the hospital for a blood test. The suspect admitted to police she had several drinks before the crash. West Allis police tell me officers did make mistakes and, quote, based upon the errors, the Milwaukee DA's office did not believe the evidentiary blood test results obtained would be admissible in court, and without that, they couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. As a result of the internal investigation, the West Allis Police Department instituted policy changes, provided additional training to the involved officer, and discipline was imposed. We're going to have much more on this breaking story tonight at 4 and 5, including reaction from the victim's family and why officers let that suspect go home in the first place. Mike?
A suspected drunk driver won't face charges for a crash in West Allis that claimed the life of a 78-year-old woman back in January. The reason? Errors were made during the investigation. CBS 58 investigative reporter Kristen Barbarisi explains what happened.
On January 30th, 78-year-old Kathleen Deichel was killed at this intersection when a suspected drunk driver slammed into her car. But charges in the case were dropped, even though court documents show the suspect blew a .248, more than 3 times the legal limit, and admitted to drinking that day. A search warrant shows before officers did field sobriety tests or a breathalyzer, police took the suspect to her home and let her go inside to care for her dogs. Then police did the field tests, arrested the suspect, and took her to the hospital for a blood test. In a statement, West Allis police say because of officer errors, the Milwaukee District Attorney didn't believe the blood test would be admissible in court, and without it, they couldn't prove the case. CBS 58 investigates went to the suspect's home for comment. Her husband answered the door.
They did their investigation, and it kind of went to what it went to.
Anything to say to the family of the victim?
No, at this point, no. It obviously was just horrible, so that's kind of, that's really all I can say.
West Allis police conducted an internal investigation and tell us they have, quote, instituted policy changes, provided additional training to the involved officer, and discipline was imposed. Reporting in West Allis, Kristen Barbarisi, CBS 58 News.
And West Allis police declined to say just what discipline was imposed. A lawyer for the victim's family would not comment on the investigation, but tells us, quote, we are fighting for the victim's family to achieve justice in every way we can in the civil justice system.
CBS 58 Investigates sifted through hours of body camera video. We know as a result of this case, officers were disciplined and retrained. Now we're able to see exactly what happened. We're not naming or showing the suspect because she's not charged.
You feel like a big man?
No, I really don't.
Well, how the do you use this thing?
Do you want my help, or are you just going to keep yelling at me?
This body camera video obtained by CBS 58 Investigates shows the 51-year-old suspect in a fatal OWI crash shortly after her arrest January 30th.
You turned around and just...
Want to make a phone call or not?
Yes.
Before being booked, the suspect was taken to the hospital for a blood test. Officers also breathalyzed her.
Good, steady breath.
She initially denied drinking, but after blowing a .24, 3 times the legal limit, she came clean.
We had one shot of vodka on the side of one of the Bloody Marys.
Why did you drive?
Because I was stupid and we wanted cigarettes.
It seems like a straightforward case, but the suspect isn't facing charges because prosecutors say they can't use any of this evidence. The problem started back at the scene at 92nd and Lapham. The suspect was driving this black Jeep and slammed into this tan Camry, killing the driver, 78-year-old Kathleen Deichel. The officer who interviewed the suspect at the scene repeatedly said she didn't seem drunk.
You have nothing to indicate
She's
impairment.
walking fine, she's talking fine.
The officer even tells a sergeant he doesn't have probable cause to get a blood test.
All I smell on her is perfume, and it's the only thing she took. I said, when's the last time you even drank? She said 3 days ago. She said she really doesn't drink that much.
Deputy District Attorney Kent Lovern says it's statements like this that destroy the case.
They talked among themselves about this situation, that she was not intoxicated. And after that, they couldn't order her to do things. They had to get her consent to do things.
Police did ask the woman to do a voluntary blood test.
Yay, nay?
She said no because she's worried about her dogs.
So officers decide to take the suspect home so she can let her dogs out and then ask again.
I'm just concerned with, well, if something comes back, she said she already said no, but she'll do it if we do this. But she came up to me afterward and she said, I'm willing to do whatever. I just really need to get my dogs out.
Video in the home is blurred by police for the suspect's privacy.
Imagine there's a line directly in front of you going this way.
Again, the suspect refuses to consent to any tests, so the officer orders her to do field sobriety tests.
You're going to follow the tip of the pen with your eyes and your eyes only.
They did not have the reasonable suspicion to order her to engage in field sobriety tests. They had to ask her for her permission to do that, and she didn't give them her permission to do that.
That means the field tests, arrest, breathalyzer, and blood test are inadmissible in court.
Ma'am, you're under arrest for an OWI rape.
Okay.
Just relax.
All right, I'll do it. I'll do it.
No,
I'll do it.
Too late now. We've been trying to work with you this whole time.
Back on scene, other officers question why field sobriety tests weren't done right away, just based on the severity of the crash.
That's why it's like, hey, do the fields, because I'm not saying officers don't, we all miss.
West Allis Police Deputy Chief Robert Fletcher tells CBS 58 Investigates an internal investigation was conducted and officers were disciplined and retrained. In a statement, he says the department made policy changes, and now more experienced officers will handle drivers during investigations of serious and fatal crashes. An attorney for the victim's family says he is fighting for justice in the civil justice system. Now, we did file an open records request for the internal investigation to find out who was disciplined and how. We're still waiting for those records. In studio, Kristen Barbarisi, CBS 58 News.
An update to a CBS 58 investigation. 2 West Allis police officers suspended after a botched OWI investigation. We showed you the body camera video last week. 78-year-old woman was killed in the January crash. The suspect in that crash blew a .24. That is 3 times the legal limit. But she is not facing charges because of mistakes made by police. Now, CBS 58 Investigates obtained the internal investigation into the crash, which found a sergeant and an officer on scene violated multiple department policies. The sergeant suspended for 5 days, the officer suspended for 7 days. Both are now back at work. Watch this full story and the body camera video online, CBS58.com.
In just the last few months, 2 suspects in fatal OWI crashes got off because of police errors. CBS 58 Investigates looked into how it happened and how common these mistakes are.
It was extraordinarily reckless. You had been drinking, and though you're no longer charged with the alcohol violation, by your own admission you were drinking.
2015, police say then 20-year-old Dartavian Watson blew through a stop sign, going more than twice the posted speed limit and slammed into a building, killing his passenger, 25-year-old Robert Johnson. Watson pleaded guilty to homicide by intoxicated use of a vehicle. But in June, the Court of Appeals overturned his conviction because the blood sample which proved Watson was drunk was illegally obtained by Racine police.
The decision from the Court of Appeals did suppress the BAC, correct?
The test results from the blood draw, yes.
According to court records, police read Watson informing the accused at the scene, telling him if he didn't give a blood sample, he could lose his license. But the court ruled police needed Watson's consent for the blood draw because they did not have probable cause to arrest him. It's at least the second time this year the suspect in a fatal OWI got off because of police errors. Body camera footage captured the aftermath of this January crash in West Dallas that left a 78-year-old woman dead.
I'm not seeing any signs of impairment. She's steady, she's not slurring.
On scene, officers repeatedly said they did not have probable cause to suspect the woman who caused the crash was drunk.
She's walking fine, she's talking fine. All I smell on her is perfume.
But officers did field sobriety tests anyway.
Imagine there's a line directly in front of you going this way.
And ended up making an arrest. The suspect had a blood alcohol concentration 3 times the legal limit. But as CBS 58 Investigates first reported in July, she's not facing charges because the arrest was illegal.
I think a lot of people could look at these situations and say a guilty person got off on a technicality. That's not really true. We're not talking about technicalities. We're talking about fundamental constitutional rights.
Andrew Mishlove is an attorney who specializes in OWI cases. He says there are standards police need to meet every step of the way during an OWI arrest. First, police need probable cause to pull someone over. Then, they need reasonable suspicion to believe someone is impaired, like glassy eyes or slurred speech.
Then they're allowed to investigate that. Ask them to get out of the car, ask them to do field sobriety tests.
If police get probable cause from those tests, then they can ask for a preliminary breath test.
Then they can arrest somebody, and they're allowed to ask for an official breath or blood sample.
CBS 58 Investigates looked into how often police make mistakes during this process.
I would say that in about 80% of the cases I review, I see police errors. The question is, are those errors serious, or are the errors serious enough to require the case to be dropped? And the answer to that is very rarely.
According to the most recent numbers from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, in 2015, 25,734 OWI suspects were processed in court. 93% of those suspects were found guilty. But could the number of OWI suspects going free increase as body cameras become more common?
Body cameras and squad car cameras have really changed the way that we do business on both sides.
Mishlove says the West Dallas case is a perfect example.
Officers have a conversation. They discuss with each other how they don't have probable cause, but they're going to take the blood anyway. That's all recorded. Without the body camera, that never would have been known, and that person would have been wrongfully prosecuted.
Earlier this month, Dartavian Watson took a new plea deal on a lesser charge. He got time served and was released on extended supervision. In court, he promised to make good use of this second chance. Reporting in studio, Kristen Barbarisi, CBS 58 News.